law! No Sharia law! One law for all! No Sharia law! One law for all! No Sharia law! One law for all! No Sharia law!
Equality, and to do this in the name of upholding and promoting human rights. Systems of religious law are common in many parts of the world, and many of them have been reformed. But as this important report launched today from the One Law for All campaign says, every single one of these reforms, whether it produced a common legal code or reformed different religious laws, took place because of internal movements of reform and for greater secularization. Today, banks and government aid agencies are promoting Sharia laws and parallel legal systems as forms of cheap and accessible justice. Many of them acknowledge that these systems don't in fact deliver justice. They're a particular problem for women and minorities since they reinforce the power of local elites. But nobody cares about this enough to change the policy. In fact, papers are being written to provide intellectual justification for it. Worthy academics misread women's rights arguments, and they talk about balancing rights between group rights and individuals. Beware when you hear about arguments of balancing rights. It's generally a code for denying women's rights. The international order is telling us that peace and stability will only be secure when women are forced back into submission and the chiefs are back in power. This is what's happening in the dying days of Britain's role as an international policeman. This is what talking to the Taliban means. This is what's happening in many parts of the world away from international attention. Fundamentalists are not seen as a threat to peace and security. As long as they promise not to plant bombs in Britain, they will be allowed to make lives miserable abroad. And it is women who are being told that they constitute the threat to security by disrupting the plans of the powerful. In the course of years of work with women's rights activists across the world, I've often been asked why Britain's major export is fundamentalism, particularly those that the last government decided were moderates. We have a new government now, but I'm concerned that this will not change much. For one, indirect rule is the one tried and tested method of empire, and it's considered a cheap alternative in post-empire days. Fundamentalists preach the politics of purity, but they're very promiscuous about getting into bed with any political party. They will reinvent themselves as part of the big society and offer cut-price services. In fact, one of the main organizing centers of global fundamentalism, the East London Mosque, already does just that. So if anyone thinks this isn't an issue, that the coming cuts to public services are what matters, think again. Cheap private law alongside services delivered by religious organizations will be offered as a cheap 2-for-1 deal which will contain and isolate Muslims in Britain. We're also being told that women want these councils, they have a choice. Many years ago, I made a program about the Hindu fundamentalism, about sati in India, the burning of women on the funeral pyres of their husbands. And we were told that the women get on these pyres because they're filled with a spiritual power and their patriarchs can't stop them burning themselves. And what happened was that sati had been made illegal. Before it was illegal, it was women's duty to burn themselves. And if they were reluctant, they were forced onto those pyres by the patriarchs. But when it became illegal, suddenly it appeared to be that they were filled with spirits, and that's why they did it. That was the choice women were exercising. And finally, I want to say that today there is a march going on in the East End. And I think that it is a very significant march for many reasons. One is that in many ways that march the events around that march represent some of the changes that are happening now. This election brought the Conservatives to power, but it also defeated the forces of the far right. the BNP, UKIP, and Respect. They were all defeated. The majority of the British people are ahead of the ideologues, the racist ideologues and the anti-racist ideologues who didn't know what hit them. In the face of coming hardship, most British people of all racial and religious backgrounds refuse the politics of hate and fear and intimidation. The electorate is ahead of the activists and the theorists. Today in Tower Hamlets there's a mobilization apparently against racism. People rightly wanted to mobilize against the English Defence League coming to Tower Hamlets. But it is Bengali activists who have said that they will not take the leadership of the East London Mosque because the East London Mosque also represents the politics of hate as well as the English Defence League. And some poor, honest, good people who want to stand against anti-racism are marching behind the East London Mosque to express their solidarity with Muslims. I say to them, if they want to express their solidarity with Muslims and not the politics of hate, they should be here at the One Law for All demonstration. A new language for anti-racism that defends that opposes all forces of fascism. But the languages that are being used by the exhausted anti-racists are only actually a few. They're a very foolish few people. Many more, numbering millions, are those who have repeatedly rejected the politics of fundamentalism. Here in Britain and across the world, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in India, Iran, in Sudan, Iraq, and many, many other countries. People reject the politics of fear and hate and fascism.